Okay, what we'll do tonight is a little bit of a review of the first seifim of Kuf Hey. Won't get into too much of the details, but just an overview of the main concepts, including Kavush. Siman Kuf Hey did begin with the concept of Isur Shenofa Letoch Heter, but it's not the typical Isur Shenofa Letoch Heter that we have to determine Bitul of the Taaruvot. It's an Isur that falls into Heter, and it could also mean Heter that falls into Isur. There are various ways that they make contact. And it first began by introducing to us, even though we may be already familiar with it from the past, of one form of contact, and that is the immersion process of kavush. When a heter is immersed or soaking in Isur, or somehow Isur was immersed in heter. Regardless, the fact that the two came in contact through kavush presents a problem. And from the Rosh, we learned three important dinim, at least. At the very basic, we learned that kavush is doraisa, even though in Basar v'chalav it's not an issue, because that's not real bishul, it's not the real way of cooking things. And the Isur Basar v'chalav, as far as cooking them, involves real cooking. And kavush is not real cooking. It's not the cooking that's done over the fire. Nevertheless, the process of kavush in Hilchos Isur v'heter is just as much as a problem as bishul would be in Shabbos. It was just like you can't cook on Shabbos. You can't put two things together. Of course, with the evet, it would be asur too, if they were kavush together. So there's a din of kavush d'oraisa, there's a din of kavush meis leis, even though that is not so clear how much it to be. But we learn that it needs to be, for the most part, 24 hours or more. And we learned the din that kavush is applicable regardless of how it happened, of the liquid, whether it's coke, whether it's the water, whether it's tzir or chometz. Just by that tzir and chometz, possibly, it could be a shorter period of time. Because of the acidity of the liquid, it may give off the taste sooner. Because what's going to happen in the end with kavush? It's going to impart the taste. The Isur is going to impart the taste into the heter. The heter will absorb the taste of the Isur. And that's what we're concerned with, the tam. And that can happen through kavush. So it could happen less than 24 hours, depending on the liquid. But the idea of kavush, regardless, will always work, will always be effective after a certain amount of time for sure. Okay, that was just the basic halachas of kavush. And it asers, of course, if that's what we're dealing with, if that's what the situation involves. Things that are immersed or soaked together.
Now, Basar v'chalav, even though kavush isn't, it does not have the same...
No, it's not it's the Rabbanan.
Kavush is the Rabbanan.
Yeah, by Basar v'chalav.
No,
even though the
kavush as an act is considered
as by an Isur v'heter,
but it does not have the same as cooking,
that's
which is the actual is Basar v'chalav.
Oh, Basar v'chalav, that's correct.
So it's two distinct.
Right.
Kibush is the right, but it doesn't have the
that's correct.
As the Isur that results from it is the Rabbah.
That's correct.
By Basar v'chalav.
Right.
So I'm wondering whether by Taaruvot the Isur Kibush is also the Rabbanan, results from it.
Well, we have no. The whole Isur that is being produced is the raisa. It's asur. It's the raisa. Yeah, that's what we learned. Now we did say that if it's less than that, less than the shear of tzir, which is by enough to put it on the fire to boil, or by meis leis, if it was less than that, you would remove a klipa, right? And that would be sufficient. So here we're introduced to something called a klipa, which you may know from Basar v'chalav too. There's another thing that's called kedei netila, which we will see after Pesach and Mitzvah Shem. There is sometimes to remove more than just a klipa. A klipa is very, very small. And a tila is the width of an etzba, so it's quite a bit more. You need to remove it. And sometimes all you need is hadacha ba'alma, rinsing it off. We did discuss briefly what happens if you never did remove a klipa and you had to, so I don't know if we need to go into that again, but for the most part, many poskim hold that if by mistake you never removed it, you don't have to worry about it. It's not that you have to mevatel it. It's a klipa is a chumrah. So that was the halachas of bishul. The klipa that I mentioned, by the way, by kavush, was by tzir. If If it's less than an ace ve'ace, less than an ace la'ace, you don't even need a klipa. There was sin behadocha. The klipa is only where there was seer involved. It was not sufficient amount of time. You would still require to take off a klipa. Okay.
So if there was sufficient amount of time, the klipa wouldn't help.
By what?
If it was me'esle.
Right. No, then it answers completely.
If it's less, then seer you don't even need a kedikli.
By regular water covers, right?
But by seer you would need a klipa if it's less than the time.
Yeah, what's interesting about this, actually, before we go on, is that we are going to see now a situation where something is not hot yet, but it's on the way to becoming hot. And it's not yet soledas, but it's cooking, it's on the fire. What's the halacha? So here, we already got a little bit of an idea that if something was not there for the complete shear, it could be a problem. By tzir, it appears to be more of a problem than it is by water. Water somehow we're more lenient, to the point that we even said that if it wasn't continuous, even if it wasn't 24 hours, you took it out, you replaced the water, somehow you broke the chain, you interfere with the continuity, and it doesn't have the same effect of being mavliya. This is a deraisa, so it's interesting that kavosh is not as powerful. It's not heat, but after a certain amount of time, the time will be absorbed. But if you interfere with this process, it just won't work. And hadacha be'alma is what's required with water. What's here a klipa? Okay. Anyway, that was kavosh. Then we went on to additional concepts which are important for us to be clear about, and that is kli rishon, kli sheni, maybe irui, dover gush, yatzaladas boy. These concepts I will do a quick review about them. But before we go to the review, I promised that I would make a clarification about the idea that is mentioned in Ramah of do we say tatah govar by kalim or not? And we say yes. We hold that we say tatah govar by kalim, and it can make a difference. You put a hot piece of meat, hot piece of meat, roast, into a cold keli, benyoima. We're concerned here because this is a benyoima, okay? And it's melichix, okay? Or it's an isser. Let's make it easier. It's an isser. It's a real isser. It's cold pot. So the piece of meat is going on the cold pot. And we set the tall govar. What does the tall govar mean? Whichever is in the bottom is stronger. In this case, what's at the bottom is cold. So what does it mean that it's stronger? Well, as a result of the hot not being in the bottom, but being on top, it is not as strong as had the hot been at the bottom. And because of that, the combination of the two, the hot sitting on the cold, the tall govar says that there will not be a complete isser. In other words, the complete the meat will not transfer the taste into the pot in a way which it would if there would be regular cooking. In other words, there's only so much it can do because of the fact that it's sitting on top. How much will it aser the pot? Kedei klipa. So this pot, that is a kosher pot, if the meat is aser, the meat is hot, the pot is kosher, the most it could do to the pot is aser kedei klipa. So that's always true even with food. With food, hot on top of cold, the most you can answer is kedei klipa. So this is a form of heat, a form of contact. There's no cooking, there's no kavush. It's a din of tatah gover. The two are sitting on top of each other. Makes no difference. Good question. How long? Makes no difference. Sat there for a few seconds. We're going to be machmir to remove a klipa. Obviously, with the pot, you can't remove a klipa unless it's wood, right? So you would have to kosher it. It would require koshering. But the good news is that if you didn't, just like we said before, klipa that you needed to remove, supposedly, it may work okay. It may work. Lechatchila you really do need. You need to kosher it, and you need shishim keneged the klipa, as we've said before. But perhaps you can be mekel sometimes because of the same din.
Sense.
Right?
If you're going to disregard the
Right.
kedei klipa b'diavad, and you not disregard the pot.
Exactly.
You're not going to eat the pot. You're going to eat the food.
Right.
But if you kosher it, you get out.
Yeah, I just recall that sometimes you do need the shishim kedei the klipa that's in the pot. But anyway, it could be that we could be lenient in this.
Consider, I have a food
Yes.
that absorbed
Yes.
By the Taaruvot.
Yes, of course.
If I don't remove the klipa, I can eat food itself where I should have removed it. Here I'm not going to eat the
Yeah.
pot.
Just remember, the Shach said, remember what the Shach said. The Shach said if you can recognize, he was the one that was machmir, one of the ones that was machmir at least, that if you can still recognize that people still did that you needed to and you did not, well, then you're out of luck and you can negate that klipa. It's only when you don't recognize it, so by a pot and pan, it's recognizable, it's still there.
But even
That's the difference.
But even according to the Shach,
Yeah, right.
so the pot needs a klipa, but what I cooked in it shouldn't have the same din.
No, so that's the question. The question is, by the evid you cooked, and you never removed the klipa, you never were machshir
Of the pot.
the pot.
So what do I do with the meat? Do I do a klipa of the meat?
No.
The
So
kosher
you
meat
would
that I
need
cooked
you would need shishim keneged the klipa according to the Shach at least. Yeah. If you're not, there's going to be a problem. Because everybody agrees, those at least who hold it, the Tal Gava here applies. The Taz, there's an interesting Taz here that says, by the way, if the piece that's hot has a Belias Isser, which we'll talk about more about Pesach, a very interesting chiluk between an Isser in itself versus a piece of meat or a piece of food that has a Belia. We discussed it various times, that there's a chiluk between the two. Is it the real Isser, or does it have a Belia? Because if it's only a Belia, it cannot travel too far. When you put meat, it's all meat, on top of a pot, if the pot is cold, the meat is hot. Maybe something will go into the pot. But what if this is a piece of vegetable that has some meat flavor absorbed into it? It will not go. It cannot travel so far. It's a blia, it's not the real meat.
So you're talking about absorption?
A taste absorption, yeah. It's an Isser Balua versus...
I think you're already topic-wise, from the Kli.
Yeah, no, I'm going back to it. I'm getting back to it.
So if it's only a
Yeah.
Belia of the flesh in
Right.
the milk pot,
No, so right now we have a...
then to the pot?
No, you do. We're going to talk about that, Rabbi Kiva Eger. If there's a Rabbi Kiva Eger on that. You take a piece of meat that's hot, or a piece of Isser that's hot, and you put it on the K'deir that's cold. We're going to say Tatal Gavar. For what purpose? It will help us in a sense that all that became Asur is a Kedei Klipa in the pot. Now, what's interesting, and this is what I was going to check, is what happens if the keli is hot, okay? The keli is hot over here, okay, or the food is hot. Let's take an example of the food is hot, and you put a cold keli on top, like a spoon. You have a dish with food in it, okay, and this is a kli rishon. That's what we're concerned right now.
The spoon.
The food that's hot at the bottom, right? So the one that's hot is now at the bottom. Let's call it the food, and you put the spoon, because you're not going to put a plate unless you want to cover it with a plate.
But is the Isser here? The spoon has the Isser or the
Regardless, here it really doesn't make a difference. Who is the Isser? We will see where it does make a difference, by the way. But here it doesn't make a difference. One is hot and one is cold. The din of Tatar cover is mostly. One is hot, the other one is cold. One is at the bottom, one is at the top. The one that's at the bottom, if it is hot, what do we say? It makes that which is on top, the cold, completely asur, food. But what if it's a keli, like a spoon? This is where we left off. It will only asur kedei klipa. In other words, with a keli, regardless of whether it's at the bottom, a plate, or it's on top, as a spoon, right? Even if the one on the bottom is the hot, and whenever something at the bottom is the hot, the din of the Torah Gover says that it makes the food on top of it completely asur, not kedei klipa, not netila, anything. Because Torah Gover means it overcomes or overwhelms, right, the one that's on top. So to the point where it makes everything asur as though it was cooked. We're talking about the heat of a kli rishon right now. We haven't gotten to kli sheni, which is not going to be an issue. Whenever heat is an issue, like it is in a kli rishon, then even if it's not on the fire, right? A kli rishon which was removed from the fire is still a kli rishon. In Hilchos Shabbos it exists, and in Hilchos Yisrael V'Heter here it exists. That we have to give it respect. This is still hot. You have to be careful, even though it's not on fire. So if there's something hot at the bottom, and you put something cold on the top, Tator Govar. Tator Govar is so strong that this contact, this form of contact by placing one on top of the other, not mixing, just putting on top of the other, is strong enough. The one that's in the bottom is always strong enough to, do something to the one on top. In this case, the one in the bottom is hot, so what it will do is it will answer everything on top. If the hot is on top, it doesn't have so much koach. Tatar govar means the cold is stronger than the hot. But because
not the cold bottom.
the cold that's sitting on the bottom is stronger than the hot that's sitting on top. But what we did say is, but as a result of the weight, as it's cooling off, it's coming down, it is mavliya, a kedei klipa. Right? So when we say mavliya, by the way, we say both ways. Into the cold, and the cold into the hot. Okay? When we say mavliya, we mean both directions. Okay? So when you have a plate, instead of food, hot on top of cold, the hot is going to be mavliya flavor into the cold, and it's going to absorb, all right, the flavor of the keli, of the dish, into the meat. Kedei klipa. Kedei klipa only, because the hot is on top. If the hot is in the bottom, it causes more problems. The only time the hot in the bottom achieves only the issue of klipa is if it's a spoon, a keli, versus food, which is a chiddush. In a way, it's a chiddush, because usually there's no difference between food and kelim. You make the food aser, you make the keli aser. Here, the Achronim, the Poskim, explain that it's less of a problem, because it does not have the same koach to affect a keli as it does with food.
Does it actually have to touch, and you put a milky cover over it? So it's not touching.
No, it has to be touching. Eventually, we'll talk about zeya. What you're talking about is, you cover the lid and there's no contact, but there's maybe zeya coming up, vapors. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so this din of klipa is apparent from the Ramah, later on in Sif Zayin. When we get to it, we'll discuss it again. And from the Chaber and the Ramah in Siman Tzadik Dalad, actually, in Basar B'Cholov, and in the Shach.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
We said now that if at the bottom is cold,
That's always a kedei klipa.
So, excuse me, we said the bottom is hot, and that's what we said.
Yes.
The bottom will usher the spoon because of tatakavar.
And the food will become also kedei klipa from the spoon. Right.
If the spoon is this, what if the bottom is cold
Okay.
and the spoon? Now, if it wasn't then we would say it ushers kedipa.
Right.
But when we had the case it's more humridic
Right.
with the heat at the bottom,
Right.
then we said the spoon that's cold coming from the top will only be usher kedipa.
Right.
But if it was meat, it will be complete usher.
Right.
So now that we have the case that the standard case, it only ushers kedipa, the cold is at the bottom.
Right.
If what is coming from the top is a spoon, is it also asur klipa?
Yeah.
As though it was.
Yes.
So whether the bottom one is hot or the bottom one is cold, and keli.
When a keli is involved,
it will always be asur
kedei klipa, exactly.
So you don't really have a din of tatagavar, but because it will also be asur klipa.
It will, there will be a tatar gavar, in other words. No, but the amount of isu would only be a kedei klipa.
So where do you see tatagavar take it?
You don't really see the
Exactly,
tatar,
that's what I'm
right?
saying.
You don't really see the tatar gavar
It
take.
doesn't make a difference.
Right.
Whether the bottom one is hot or cold, and the top
Yeah.
one is hot or cold,
Yeah.
ultimately. Now what if both are hot?
Then you say it's
Then
also.
everything is asur.
Then you say it's
so as
also.
long as there's a discrepancy in
Right.
the temperature between
That's
the
correct.
two,
Yeah.
regardless which one is at the bottom, if there's a kli involved, it will also both of them be asur kedi klipa.
Right.
The hot meat in the bottom also only kedi klipa. If the hot meat is at the bottom,
Right.
and the cold spoon is coming down,
Right.
now the spoon will only be asur
Both.
kedi klipa.
Both. The food and
Also
the keli kedei klipa.
Only kedei klipa.
Only kedei klipa. Yeah.
Even though tatagavar,
Even though tatar gavar, right.
and the bottom is food.
Right.
But when I put the food into the pot, which is asur,
Right.
and I
Which-
have tatagavar,
Right.
then the whole meat will become asur, not just
How's that?
I have a blias of Israel.
You have what's hot and what's cold.
The
piece-
pot is hot.
The pot is very hot, and you have some food, cold food that you're putting into the pot,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. So the food will only become
Only kedei klipa.
the food only becomes asur
Kedei klipa, right.
and if it's on the fire.
No, that's different. We're not talking about on fire. We're not talking about on fire, right? We're talking about a clear rishon that is removed from the fire right now.
So everything we said
The din of Tatar Gover has nothing to do with on the fire.
Only if it's removed from the fire.
Right. The din of Tatar,
right.
That's where the din of Tatar Gover applies, right?
So wait a second. So if I have a pot,
The additional chiddush of Rabbi Akiva Eiger and Chavas Das was that only the part of the spoon or the keli that actually touches the food, that section becomes asur in the klipa. We don't say that the whole plate or the whole spoon, even the portion that was sticking out that never touched the food, becomes asur.
Which by a metal spoon would be
Which by a metal spoon, perhaps yes, by cooking or by food. Food, when you put in the whole food, becomes asur, even that which is outside, unless near, right? You mix the whole thing.
Even that which isn't touching the pot.
Even that which is not touching, right? So with kelim, they add this additional detail that part of the plate, that part of the spoon that is in contact, only that part becomes asur.
Or
asurs, not the whole thing.
You know, by a non-metal spoon, I think that would be always the case. When do we say, what was it, kula or something like that?
Yeah.
Only by metal spoon.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on. So that was just a special din by kelim, that the Mechaber brings down the din of the Torah Gover. And the Torah Gover has to do with a situation where you have heat, not on the fire, but it's a clear. So now let's go into explaining what this clear rishon is and clear sheni is, and so forth. Choim clear rishon, that is yatzur this boy, is the following scenario. You have a pot that was on the fire, that was removed from the fire. Okay? Your wife made some noodles or some goulash, right? And she turned off the flame. Turning off the flame is just like removing it from the fire and putting it on the counter. Okay? You close the flame, you turn it off. So it's very, very hot. That's called rishon. Rishon meaning that's where it was cooked to begin with. It's still very hot. How hot? At least yatzoledes. At least yatzoledes. Now, first of all, since we're talking about yatzoledes, let's explain what yatzoledes is. The literal translation means I cannot hold my hand too long in this food, in this liquid. How long can I hold? Can I not hold it? There's different opinions. Some say you cannot hold it more than 15 seconds. What's the temperature of yatzoledes boy? It's at the very least, apparent for most poskim, at least 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, we're machmir, of course, in Hilchos Shabbos, you have to be careful with, even if it's a little bit less than that. Even if it's 110, I think nobody should find that. You have to be careful with that. Now, we know what yatzoledes for sure is. You know, if it's a lot hotter, and it's going to come to a point where you're going to have a hard time drinking this, and if everybody will agree it's yatzoledes. But we're talking about the range where there are differing opinions as to whether it is or it's not. Because yatzoledes is really not universal. Some people can hold it longer. Some people can hold less. That is why the Gemara uses the term kreiso shel tinok nichva, that the belly of a baby will get burnt. Will turn red. Okay? But that's approximately the temperature. You can say between 45, maybe a little higher, Celsius, or 110, 113, maybe a little bit more. That's for sure. That's more than likely yatzoledes, according to most poskim.
So,
including Rosh
110, would that also be 3 or something?
43. Yeah, 45 is already 113. Yeah, 43 is about 110.
So that's according to
Yeah. Shlomo Zalman, I think, says less than 45 is not yatzoledes. 45 and above is yatzoledes. Okay, so you can cook it. You can make an egg, an omelet outside, huh? Yeah. Anyway, so there are various shitas, but that's approximately what yatzoledes boy if you were interested in temperature. So you removed it from the fire. It's yatzoledes boy. It's mevashel. It's real bishul, and therefore anything that you put into it, isur, heter, whatever, it's asur. Asur kuloi. The whole thing is asur. The moment we removed something from this kli rishon and put it into another pot, a plate, a bowl, that's called already a kli sheni. Okay, so far so good. Now, what's the din of a kli sheni? Mechaber and Ramah say, just like in Hilchos Shabbos, kli sheni is not mevashel. We hold, it's a machlokes, kli sheni does not have the power to cook. Once we've transferred this liquid, this food stuff, into another plate or bowl, it just loses its power. Why? Because the dafnos, the walls of the vessel, of the plate, the bowl, will slowly but surely cool off the content. So kli sheni therefore does not have the koch to mevashel, and that is why the question is, can you add croutons to it? Can you add some spice, missing a little salt? And we're usually lenient with most things. Oh, the ladle. Remember the ladle? That was a question. So if the pot is not on the fire, it has been removed from the fire, then if you take a ladle, lechara, the ladle was already a kli sheni. So by the time it gets to your soup bowl, it should be considered a kli shlish, and then you can put your croutons, no problem. Supposedly. Makes no difference. That's a good question too. But wait a minute, it's still yad soledis boy, but it's a kli sheni. No. Even if it's yad soledis boy in the kli sheni, the fact that it's a kli sheni, that yad soledis boy is not as significant. Which is interesting.
If the kli rishon is, but it's yad soledis boy,
then supposedly, according to some, that ladle is already a kli sheni.
Once it's off the fire.
Because you're taking directly from it, you're not pouring into it, maybe into the rishon, and it's like becomes part of the rishon.
That's the whole point was...
It is. Again, we hold it is, but...
I'll tell you why I'm surprised. Yeah. Because the whole point we were discussing at time until Shabbos was why the walls of the cook is because they acquired fire from the fire themselves.
That's correct. Yeah.
So they're bringing to the food.
Yeah, but remember.
But the ladle.
Yeah, but remember, I understand
unless
that.
it touches the pot.
You're right. Yeah, that's the thing. The problem is, you're right. That's the way we hold. Well, I think most boys can hold like that, especially if it's off the fire. The only problem is that the reason why a kli sheni, a real kli sheni, is more of a kli sheni than a ladle, because you poured. You've had a step called irui in between the kli rishon. Right. The irui already cooled off, so it's a combination of the irui, perhaps a combination of the irui. They transfer the irui, and now it's in a kli sheni. That causes this kli sheni to be called a kli sheni. Because some, of course, have a problem with this yad soledis boy in a kli sheni. The Chasam Sofer says even in a kli shlishi, if it's very, very hot, so what?
Yes.
It cooks.
Yes, good approach.
Yeah, different approach altogether. But we're looking at the physics of it, that's apparent, based on what we're told. That the moment it's been transferred, it cools off, and like you explained very nicely, it hasn't been cooked.
It did not acquire heat.
Right, it doesn't have that same heat. So even though it's very hot to the touch, it's not as strong.
So when you
it will dissipate. It will cool off very quickly. It will not retain its heat as fast. So it may be hot momentarily, but in a few seconds.
When you put the lid in the soup that's removed from there,
yes,
what's going to heat up the soup?
Yeah.
So that's the same exact thing that will happen if you pour it in a pot that's standing off the fire or into a bowl. What's going to heat up the bowl?
Yeah.
So in both cases, the ladle doesn't add heat.
Yes.
The ladle is being heated up the soup, and when the soup heats up the ladle, what happens to the soup?
You're right.
The soup is cooling down.
That's why we hold. That's why we hold.
So it's the exact same process.
Apparently, I mean, there's no irui involved, but it's being transferred. It's moving over from one pot to another. Yes, and that is why that's the way. I mean, I've always explained it in Hilchos Shabbos that by the time it gets to your soup bowl, the soup, it should be called more likely than not a kli shlishi because of the ladle, which means I should be able to put croutons, even if you hold yesh bishul achar, yesh afiyah achar, yesh bishul achar afiyah. You're not allowed to cook something that was baked. The croutons are baked. You have to be careful. Yeah, but this is a kli. There's no problem. Kli shlishi doesn't cook, according to most people. For sure not. I can put almost anything I want. I can put my challah in there. I can put anything you want. Just don't put your matzah if you don't eat gebrochs.
That's a big question.
That's something else.
Chabadniks don't eat gebrochs.
Yeah, a lot of people. I don't eat. I don't eat. Yeah, I don't eat gebrochs. Yeah.
Wasn't that also a problem with whether it baked?
Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah. The Sephardim don't have a problem with that either. They don't hold with that. It's not a chashash. Yeah, but anyway, that's a different topic.
What's the gebrochs?
Yeah, they don't have a problem with matzah shira either. Egg matzah. All right, so we covered kli rishon, we covered yad soledis boy, and now we're into kli sheni. So kli sheni is not mevashel, or is it? We see the mechaber himself brings several shitas, which he doesn't always do, And at the end, he actually says you should be machmir like them. The kli sheni could be a problem. We're talking about isurim now. And when you're talking about isurim, even though in Hilchos Shabbos you got to say it's mutter or not, it's bishul or not, here we're talking about tam. We're talking about the absorption of tam. That's yatziladas, boy. Wait a minute. So he says, his language was, Roi lochush nizar v'dover lechatchila. Because some hold it's maflit and mavliya. And because there's a maflit and mavliya, either you hold it does both, or you hold it does one. Regardless, if it does, you need a klipa. Whenever there's a vlo or plita, you're going to need a klipa. If you have both, it could do both. You also need a plita. What difference does it make if kli sheni is mavliya and maflit, or just one or the other? So we said, if you have iser and heter in the same pot, in the kli sheni, which is yatzer ledes boy, okay, pot, kli sheni, whatever. You don't know if it's yatzer ledes, but it's a kli sheni. If it's mavliya and maflit, right, then it will be able to go into the heter, right, and it will be able to take out from the heter. In other words, it does both functions. And sometimes, if you say it cannot do both functions, it does not have the koyach of being mavliya and maflit, it can only do one, then it will not answer. It will only answer if the solid piece of meat was in liquid, because then it's maflit into the liquid, or boileya. But when you have two pieces, one iser and one heter, in a soup, right? If you hold that kli sheni is only mavliya or maflit, not both, then it will not have the koyach to answer the other piece. So it all depends how you hold. Does kli sheni have the koyach to both mavliya and maflit? So we say that it holds, according to some, it has at least the ability of being maflit or mavliya, not both.
You can do that. There's no visual.
Right. So the only one that's the main posted that says it's usher is the Tur, actually, which is very interesting. The Tur, actually, if you look at the Tur, he explains, it's mevashal too. But the Rashba, the Beisayisa brings him down, says it's only mavliya kedei klipa, and the Shach brings down the Yom Shem Shlomo that it's not maflit or mavliya ke'echod. In other words, one of the two. The Taz holds like him. So based on the Shach and Taz, it appears that they're machmir here, more than the Mechaber and the Ramah. That you would require by Klish, would require Klipa. Yeah, that's what appears to be from the Taz and the Shach. Alright, that's Kli Sheni. What about Irui? What's Irui? Irui is pouring. Also Machlokes HaPoskim, we talked about Irui, pouring. Now in Irui we made a small distinction, and we don't have really the time to get into too much, but it's called Nifsak HaKeluach or Lo Nifsak HaKeluach. All you need to know is as follows. Lo Nifsak HaKeluach means that the flow was not interrupted. You're pouring continuously. Okay, that's called Lo Nifsak HaKeluach. The flow is not interrupted. Nifsak means, it's interrupted. It's gone. The source is no longer there.
Connected.
No longer connected. That's the difference. Lo Nifsak is worse than Nifsak. Okay, that's all we need to know. Lo Nifsak means it's continuously coming down. A percolator is a good example of Irui. It's connected to the hot water. I mean, it's hot, right? And you open it up, and it's coming down. And you want to therefore be careful, because it's Irui, that if you put something in your cup, that it already be mevushal. That is why a lot of people are machmir to put the coffee and the sugar after they first poured from the percolator the hot water. Not to have the hot water land on this coffee. Because Irui mevashal kedei klipa. What's the machlokes? Is Irui like a kli rishon or like a kli sheni? That's the machlokes. Regardless, we hold it's mevashal kedei klipa. So if it's mevashal kedei klipa, that means there's a bishul. And in Hilchos Shabbos there's bishul. Bishul kedei klipa is bishul. It's still bishul, right? And here it's a bishul kedei klipa. It's iser. That means a little bit of the iser got absorbed. So in Hilchos Shabbos you would have to be careful not to put things, especially mikale bishul, things that easily cook, like tea leaves, that you don't even want to put in a kli sheni, because they're called kale habishul, things that easily cook. Easily. Just a little bit of hot water. It's called cook. You cook the leaf. So with Irui, that's the machlokes. Rashbam holds Irui is kli sheni and is not mevashal, but it is mavliya or maflit. That's what's understood from him. I'm sorry, that it's completely not mevashal, mavliya or maflit. No problem whatsoever. And Rabbeinu Tam holds that it's mevashel. But the question was about Rabbeinu Tam. Even though he says it's mevashel, is it mevashel everything? Is it exactly the same thing? And some say no. That the Shach explains that even Rabbeinu Tam says that the power of Iru is just to be mavir or maflik kedei klipa. That it's not a bishul gomer. So even though he holds it's like bishul, it doesn't mean that it's bishul gomer. It's mavir or maflik. So anyway, so by Iru we hold it's mevashel kedei klipa. That's the consensus. But it's a machlokes. What is it then? Is it like a kli rishon or kli sheni? That's the machlokes. So we hold that it's not really like a kli rishon, and not really like a kli sheni. It's in between. Mevashel kedei klipa, for sure. In other words, that's what you have to be concerned with. Okay. Now let's briefly go to the scenario where you have a kli rishon that is sitting on the fire, but it's not yatzer ledes bo yet. Remember we talked about that timing problem we have with kavush and seer. Well, you didn't get to 3-6 minutes or whatever it is, right? So here you put something on the fire. Oh no, I put it into the wrong pot, or I did something wrong. But it hasn't cooked yet. It's not even yatzer ledes bo. It's just it's barely starting out. You don't even see bubbles. You don't see anything. You can put your hands in. And by the way, I've tried this also with a frying pan. You don't want to put your hands in burning oil. It's worse than burning water. Burning oil, hot oil, But, when you're frying something, you started frying. You began to fry something, and you just wanted to remove one of the vegetables. So you used your finger instead of a spoon or a fork. You may get away with it if it's just in the first few seconds, because it's not hot yet. Even though the fire, the big burner is there, you put oil, it's just not hot enough. You can even touch the frying pan. Nothing will happen to you for a few seconds. Within a few seconds, it's going to get hotter and hotter. So that's the question here. What happens with the kli rishon ala eish, but it's not yatzer ledes? What's the din? The Shach brings down b'shem the Torah's chatas that you have to be machmir kedei klipa, but he says it's a chumrah. There's even some that say it's a harchaka. They call it an harchaka. You just say, oh, it's nothing. It didn't happen. No, you tell the balabosta, you got to take off a klipa for whatever. In other words, it's something. Even though Medina, it's not mevashel, because it's not hot yet. It's not even yatzer ledes. So what if it's on the fire? It's not yatzer ledes, but the Shach said you got to be machmir kedei klipa.
Why wouldn't you take a klipa?
So he says it's a chumrah. It's a chumrah. Mishbetzos Zahav explains that all of this is by a meichel, but not by a keli. He says, you hear Yilan?
Yeah.
Same thing with the keli. Also, by a keli here, if it's not yatzer ledes bo, it's not mavir maflit. So by meichel, you're machmir. Yeah. The Taz says no. It's not yatzer ledes bo. There's no problem whatsoever. So as long as you know for sure it's not yatzer ledes bo, you don't have to worry about it. This could make this could make a big difference. The typical example where I've seen this happen in the kitchen is taking a spoon, a Melicha spoon, and into a meat pot by mistake. Starts to, oh no, what do I do now? But it's not hot yet. What you're making is not hot yet. You don't have to worry. What? It hasn't heated up yet. Don't worry about it. Just rinse it out. You're safe if it's not hot. That's the typical, more common example that I've seen. Now, there's an interesting Rabbi Akiva Eiger here that says as follows: "Legabe kli sheni, that you did something that you shouldn't have, right? You did it in a kli sheni. Let's give an example of Basar b'chol. You transferred the meat into a bowl. Okay, you're having your plate or whatever, minute steak. I don't know. And you take your fork, and all of a sudden, as you're eating it, you say, wait a minute, this fork is dairy. Now what? What do you say? It's a kli sheni. Rabbi Elyahu holds a kli sheni, even though it's kli sheni, requires hagala. The plate, if it was the wrong plate, spoon or whatever, requires hagala. Why? Because you can do it. You can easily do it. Since you can easily do it, it's called a lechatchila din. When is it a b'di'evet? If it's a kli cheres. If it's a kli cheres, an earthenware that you would not be able to do hagala, don't worry about it. It only happened in the kli sheni, which is interesting. It's not a problem. It's a kli sheni, right?
So you're only worried keli that was the wrong
right.
food type.
Yeah, because you can make lechatchila, you can make hagala to it,
And here the hatchila and b'diavad has to do with.
But you see the power of kli sheni, by the way, here, or the lack of power, because it can make a difference. It's not over the fire that you have this problem. It's not that the pot that you're cooking is the wrong. Here you're dealing with a kli sheni situation. So he says make hagala, but if you can't, you don't have to. When can't you? The kli cheres.
Hatchila and b'diavad, whether you catch yourself doing that before it happened or after it happened.
No.
You caught it after it happened.
After it happened, right.
So,
Still.
So literally that will be b'diavad.
It is, of course. Literally, yeah.
It depends on
That's
what
correct,
type
yeah.
of use.
So is he saying in a cliche?
Yeah, kli shlishi you wouldn't have to do it. He only says that by kli sheni.
Now the cliche would be the meat source here.
In this case, in this example that I gave, right.
So if I put it on one plate and then transfer it, then the work would not require law.
Yeah, because by that time it's a rare.
And that's a question of time. So if I transfer it
No,
right away.
It's a definition of cliche. It doesn't matter.
We'll talk about that next, because
Okay.
what are we talking about next? We're going to make a distinction, an additional distinction between a liquid versus a solid. Because where do we actually see the difference, according to most poskim, in kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi, in liquids? Not according to the Ramah, by the way. I explained that. But according to the Rashal, if you take a piece of meat from the pot and put it down on your plate, it still has the din of kli rishon, that piece of meat. Mm-hmm. You take it to the kli shlishi, it still has a din of kli rishon for the time being. It's hot. Potatoes are hot. Some solid foods retain the heat for a while, and it would be a problem of bishul, according to the Rashal, and Hilchos Shabbos too, because it has a din of kli rishon. The meat itself, yeah.
Called a kli.
Yeah, it's like a kli. This solid piece of meat is very, very hot.
Itself was never actually on the pan or whatever.
Well, it wasn't, but it was sitting in the pot on fire. So it became so hot that for the time being, if you feel it and it's hot, it has a din of a kli rishon.
But you don't say that.
Fork is put into like a kli rishon.
What is that?
The milky fork
Right.
goes into the hot. Becomes,
Yeah, according to the Rashal, right? So if you were to eat that piece of meat with a Melicha fork, there's no question that you would need hagala,
Right.
and no question that the meat would be a problem if that fork was ben yoima.
So it's also
Unless you have shishim keneged, yeah.
You would need
60. According to the Rashal, you're in trouble if you're about to eat.
It's really no different from sticking the spoon into the pot.
Exactly, according to the Rashal.
and
Yeah.
yet the meat is.
No, it's a problem.
But we're saying we need 60.
Yeah. So, but this is only if the meat is still yatzona, this boy.
Yeah.
Okay? Obviously, it has to be hot. The Ramah, I think the Darchei Moshe, he brings down the Mapitom. He says liquid holds the heat better than solid. I don't know, it's a question here of the chemistry, of the physics of it. I don't know. But anyway, so he doesn't hold of that the solid would in any way be more stringent. He says, once you transfer everything to kli sheni, everything is a kli sheni. If anything, a liquid would retain the heat. So from the Darchei Moshe, it appears to be that he wouldn't agree with this. It wouldn't make a difference. The Bach there's a Bach here, a very interesting Bach. On the two you have Beis Yosef and you have the Bach. So the Bach says something very interesting. A piece of meat, gush, solid, that you took from a kli rishon and you put it into a kli sheni, becomes a kli sheni. However, he says, if you cut the piece of hot meat with a dairy knife, the dairy knife will become asur and not the meat. You hear? The dairy knife, which is cold, in the last year we explained that when you have something hot, plus you have duchka de sakina, then of course you have a lot more going on, because you have cutting. But what's interesting about this Bach, he says, but wait, even so, it's only the sakin that's going to become asur, not the meat. Why? He says, because the meat, being hot, has the ability, because of the knife coming down on it, to emit its flavor onto the knife. It does not have the strength to retrieve, to absorb the flavor of the knife in it.
But it was
What?
on the bottom.
Right. Yeah.
But it's kli sheni.
Here, very good point. Here it's a kli sheni. Very good point. Otherwise, you're right. In a regular tata gover situation, Of course. It would be both. At least kedei klipa, because it's a keli. We explained.
Or is it because of is it worse?
That's according to the poskim we learned that duchka sakina would be worse. We discussed that. With duchka the sakina, it would be worse by a situation of a clear rishon. Yes, that's what we discussed. But here, the Bach is saying some sort of compromise here. In other words, he's saying the knife would be asur, but not the meat. It only has so much koyach. Yeah. But the point here is, it's like you said, it's a klisheni, and that is why these things make a difference. They don't have the same koyach as if it would be in a clear rishon situation.
If it was a spoon instead of a knife with then there would be no problem. Yeah. No, he basically is talking about dafka knife. Yeah. And that has to do with the ducha besakina that we discussed before. That if you have the combination of the two, it's worse. All right. The next one was isurim munachim ze el yad ze. Heter and isur touching. There's no tato gavar, not one on top of the other. There's no kli rishon. There's no kli sheni. There's no irui. Right? This is a different kind of sin. No kavush. No.
Okay, none of these.
They're not soaking in water.
Right. After Pesach, we'll talk about sli. Sli means roasting, okay, which is a different situation. Here you have a piece of cheese touching a piece of meat, or two pieces of meat touching each other. One is mutter and one is hot. One is hot and one is cold, or both are hot. What's the din? So the Ramah, real quickly, says if they're both hot, from a choim of kli rishon, from the heat of a kli rishon, then everything is asur. And apparently, I think almost everybody's in agreement with that. Choim of kli rishon, close to each other, right? There's no din of tatal gavar here. They both become asur. Similar actually to tatal gavar, but even more. Ima echad soinen, if one is cold, haheter tzorich klipa. If one is cold, not both are hot, one is cold, then the heter needs a klipa in the mokum shenoga. That's what the Ramah says. You have to remove a klipa. The Taz brings down the Rashal. The Rashal makes a distinction of if the isser is the one that's hot versus if the heter is the one that's hot.
Where is hot will be.
Right.
So
remember that idea? Yeah, there's such a concept in Melicha and Basar b'cholav. Yeah. So the Rashal brings down that if the Isser is the one that's hot, even though one is cold, it makes the heter asur completely. In Basar b'cholav, that which is hot would require a klipa, and the one that's cold would be asur completely. That's the way he brings down. So he makes a distinction. He's the only one I think that makes the distinction that the one that is the hot, that if the isser is the hot, it's a problem. Much more than if the heter is the hot. But it's what kind of a problem is it? That it would make the whole thing usser, even though one is hot and one is cold, because the isser is the hot. If the heter is the hot, then there's only klipa problem, not more than that. So he makes that distinction. Isser is hot, even though one is cold, it's still usser. But what's interesting is the Basar b'cholav example. By Basar b'cholav, I guess because of the way, each one is mutter, so the one that's hot is also b'klipa. Here, by the way, in a hefse meruba in this situation, even though we're having a lot of rishonim, these are rishonim, giving different opinions, in a hefse meruba, you can't be makel that to only require a klipa if one is hot and one is cold, regardless of which one is hot. According to the Shach, by the way, it's always a klipa, regardless. Makes no difference. Basar b'cholav, one is hot, even if they're both hot. The Shach seems to be learning that the dinner here is always a klipa. You don't need more than that. That's what I recall. Just double check. Yeah. Afilu shneim chavim, mutter, gam kem klipa. Even though the Chavas Das, I think, explains it different, but I'm going by the way the Be'er Hatev explains it. That's the way it appears. The Shach appears to be saying that even if they're both hot, all it would be. Ramah says both hot, it's asur. Shach learns that all you need is a clean pot. Also, b'cholav that touched each other, one of them is called shneim tzrichim klipa. Both would need the basar and the cholav. Anyway, just to finish up, the last point we covered was nitzuk. Nitzuk is chibur or not chibur. There's a difference between tuma and hilchos kashrus. It's a mishnah in machshirin. One is tameh, tohar. There's a connecting flow between the two of them. So we hold that nitzuk is not a chibur, but the Ramah says that you have to be careful not to pour from a keli that has shuman that's kosher onto a lit candle of chalev. Chalev is a forbidden fat, and shuman is the kosher fat. So to pour, you will be creating a connection. Remember the pouring, right. The irui? And irui here, we're concerned about not bishul, here we're concerned about chibur, nitzuk. If that which is in the bottom, the treif, will make that which is on top aser, by virtue of the fact that they're being connected to this continuous flow. So who we hold it medina, not by tuma, by medina, as far as kashrus, the nitzuk is not a chibur. Now, based on what the Mishnah says, by tuma, over there's a difference. Tzoinen to tzoinen, cold to cold, or hot to hot, or hot to cold, is not going to be a problem. It's tohar. When is there a problem there, according to the Tanakama? Cold to hot. Did I make myself clear?
Yeah.
Cold to cold is not a problem. Hot to cold is not a problem. Right? Hot to hot is not a problem. Only cold to hot is a problem. And what are we concerned? We're concerned about that which is on top over here.
That it will become tameh.
That it will become tameh over
because
there.
It's cold and that it still
yes.
become tameh because
And we hold, and you hold that's the only scenario where it's tameh. The question is why. So some explain this flow or this combination of hot and cold as the heat, the hevel that's traveling from the bottom to the top. By combining cold with hot, it produces that hevel and it warms up or it affects that which is cold on top. The Taz explains the problem with nitzuk is nothing to do with hevel, it has to do with nitzuk. Nitzuk is chibur, it's a form of chibur, it's a connection. Whereas others explain that it's the hevel, it's the heat that's rising, heat rises. It's the heat that's rising, and the hevel that rises affects dafka, that which is cold on top. You don't have that same problem when it's hot and hot. You don't have the problem with hot and cold in the bottom. You have the problem when the hot is in the bottom and the cold is on top. Like an example of the Ramah, where you're pouring onto a ner dolok, onto a lit candle. So that's where the Mordechai explains that it appears, according to all deis, that the cham is mashpia on the cold that is being poured into it. And that's why the Ramah brings down this din by Isur V'Heter too. The Isur V'Heter explains that lechatchila, this one should be careful with this, but b'di'evet we're not machmer, it's mutter, because we don't hold nitzuk. Nitzuk meaning the connecting flow. We don't hold that it's a real connection, and therefore, even though one is hot and one is cold, they don't really connect to be a problem. Because we hold like that, b'di'evet it's not a problem. But lechatchila, one has to be careful with that. Now, the crazy place brings down that there could be a chiluk between why this is asur or why this is asur lechatchila. If you explain like the Taz, then it's going to be, in other words, it's going to be a problem. If the real reason why the Mishnah says it's asur when the one is hot and the bottom the one is cold is because of nitzuk, that's going to continue to be a problem, even over here. That's the way the crazy place explains. Whereas the other explanation is that the hevel is mashpia only when it's soinin or geyabo. That was when the cold is coming down. He seems to be saying if that's the reason, you could be more lenient with it. But if you hold like the Taz, it's going to be more of a problem. I'm sorry, it's going to be more of a problem even if the two of them are hot, I should explain, because the fact that one is hot and one is cold, we said that the heat travels and possibly makes a connection here. But if your whole explanation is like the Taz says, that the whole reason behind this halacha is of nitzuk, then what difference is even if the two of them are hot?
By tuma tahara,
right? No, by Isur V'Heter, because in the Mishnah there is a Rabbi Elyahu Kin, I think, says that even if the two of them are hot, it's asur. We don't hold like that. We hold like the Tanakama, that only when the bottom one is hot and the top is cold, there's a problem. What's the problem? It all depends how you explain it. If you explain that the heat travels, then okay. that doesn't exist, it doesn't apply when the two of them are hot. But if you explain that the problem is not traveling, but the issue is nitzuk, which is a concept in itself that exists, that they talk about. If the nitzuk is a problem, do you hold nitzuk as a chibur or not? And that's what the Taz says is the issue here. Then even if the two of them are hot, it's going to be a problem. Not like the Mishnah. We hold like the Tanakama there. But if the real explanation for this is, at least here, the real explanation is that it's nitzuk, not heat traveling, then it would be usher even if they were both hot. Anyway, that pretty much covers the first three seifim of Siman Kuf Hey.
So the difference again between whether the nitzuk is responsible, that doesn't need to travel, or the isser doesn't travel.
It's not a matter of traveling; it's a connection.
It's bringing about the connection. Already.
That's correct. Yeah.
So it doesn't need to travel; it can stay where it is and still affect the other.
Yeah. This is a Taz that is explaining the Ramah, not explaining the Mishnah. So he says over here the problem is of nitzuk chibur. Even though we hold lemaisa, we hold nitzuk is not real chibur, but the Ramah himself said you have to be machmir lechatchila at least. So according to this din, this explanation of the Taz, then in this case at least, if they were both hot, it would still be an issue. Not like the Mishnah because it's still a connection. But anyway, this is lechatchila, not the diya. Okay, we'll stop here.